I just want to start this off by saying a big thank you to Jenna for coming here to inform us about these matters, and hopefully we can move forward as a community to support relevant issues such as these. The last speech of this afternoon will be about my favorite subject, food, how we currently produce it, why that's harmful, and how we can begin becoming more sustainable in our ways. Please welcome Aurora High School senior, Ava Lovell.
Many of us do not think of agriculture when people bring up systems that should be changed. However, the ways that we produce our food have bigger price tags than are seen on the surface. To understand how we can improve our agricultural systems in our country, first we must understand how they operate and why they are harmful. Although agriculture, consisting of cultivating crops and domesticating animals, has existed for thousands of years, because it allows us to feed our population in an efficient manner, methods have changed greatly as society has advanced. In the 1950s, after the end of World War II, agricultural research resulted in new varieties of grain that were more resistant to pests and weather damage and produced higher yields. Practices of using high inputs of water, pesticides, and synthetic fertilizers also became more common. In the 1960s, more genetically superior varieties of rice, wheat, and other crops were developed to increase efficiency. All of these changes have allowed us to greatly increase yield and feed the growing population. The new varieties are also more resistant to pests, so a lower percentage of crops are lost and less is spent on pesticides. However, these food revolutions have had many negative effects as well. If excessive use of chemicals and fertilizer and pesticides alongside depletion of soil and freshwater sources were not enough, a heavily industrialized commercial agriculture based on agribusiness and mechanization was born. This industry harms soil quality, water quality, air quality, biodiversity, local economies, animal health, and human health. Soil is harmed because monoculture, which is planting only one plant species over a large field area year after year, depletes the soil of nutrients and very quickly and exhausts soil fertility, meaning plots of land can only produce large yields of food for a short period of time. This leaves the soil vulnerable to erosion, and costly applications of chemical fertilizers must be used in order to continue to produce crops. There are also heavy costs for soil replacement, cleanup, and lost farmland value. Monoculture and tilling soil in an unsustainable manner also causes topsoil erosion, which is the top nutrient-rich layer of soil necessary for organisms and takes many years to build up again. Air quality is harmed because to continue to use heavy machinery and industrialized processes such as heavy use of food processing, a great deal of energy supplied by fossil fuels is used. And in addition to contributing to air pollution indirectly, it also contributes directly through fumes, deforestation for land clearing, and pesticides that end up in the air. Water is harmed because pesticides and fertilizers drain into water sources and change the pH, endangering many ecosystems. It can also cause harmful plant and algae blooms, which absorb all the oxygen in the water, creating dead zones for aquatic life. Additionally, these chemicals contaminate drinking water and groundwater, causing negative human health effects. Biodiversity is lowered because industrial farms replace land once rich in biodiversity and in ecosystem services such as pollination. Furthermore, pesticides negatively affect the balance of nearby ecosystems by changing the population of pest species, as well as other species not meant to be affected. Habitat fragmentation, deforestation, and loss of habitat from large-scale industrial agriculture leaves less resources for many populations of organisms to survive on, lowering biodiversity further. Climate change also negatively affects biodiversity, and agriculture contributes harmful carbon emissions from the use of fossil fuels and heavy mechanization used to support food production. Deforestation to clear land depletes a natural way to clean up some of this atmospheric carbon. Then cleared land is used to support livestock such as cattle, which release very potent methane gases from digestion that contribute significantly to global warming. Local economies are harmed because, increasingly, only a few large companies control most of the food we consume. For example, the USDA stated in 2016 that the 4 largest wet corn millers and soybean producers control 84% and 82% of their respective national markets. As mid-sized farms become more rare, less people can make a living as farmers, which hurts rural communities and farm states. However, the effects of large-scale operations are still felt by these communities. Hundreds of miles away from the origin, these communities must find ways to pay for the expensive equipment needed to remove fertilizer byproducts from drinking water supplies, to make up for the loss of fishing yield in dead zones in the ocean created from excessive farm runoff, and clean up pollution from CAFOs. Methods of meat production include feedlots, concentrated animal feeding operations, CAFOs, which are essentially larger and denser feedlots, and free-range grazing. CAFOs are used as a way to quickly get livestock ready for slaughter at a lower cost, and livestock are often heavily genetically modified. For example, it is very common for chickens to collapse under their own weight because their bodies were made to grow way too large way too quickly, and their legs can't support them. CAFOs are also extremely crowded, and animals are fed grain, soybeans, corn, fish meal, and fish oil, which their bodies are not suited to digest. Feeding animals a natural feed, such as corn to cows, is done to fatten them at a lower cost. However, it causes serious harm to the digestive tract of cows, and it can breed E. coli that ends up in the meat that humans consume. Some of this feed is doctored with growth hormones and antibiotics added to accelerate livestock growth. Overuse of antibiotics in CAFOs has created more antibiotic-resistant bacteria and led to the development of dangerous strains of diseases, which poses a serious threat to human health. Lastly, because of the crowding in CAFOs, these feedlots generate a large amount of animal waste and runoff, which contaminate the ground and surface water. Human health is also impacted by the large percentage of agribusiness relating only to a few select crops. U.S. industrial agriculture operates by producing large amounts of high commodity crops like corn and soybeans because of the higher profit. Since agriculture products are mostly sold to food processing companies before consumers, a handful of crops such as corn are unnecessarily put into an extraordinary percentage of all processed food, which constitutes a significant portion of many people's diets. Because so much cropland is devoted to corn, soybeans, and other essential crops, they are put into most processed foods without reason, and therefore constitute way too much of our diets in general. These crops are often found in the form of hidden ingredients, such as corn syrup and soybean oil. This causes many serious and costly health side effects, such as high cholesterol and heart disease. To limit the negative effects of agriculture, we must create more sustainable systems. Sustainability refers to humans living on Earth and their use of resources without depleting them for future generations. Sustainable agriculture focuses on sensitive land management, limiting chemical use, and better integration of crops and livestock. Some examples of more sustainable practices include organic farming, meat from rangelands and pastures, polyculture, hydroponics, greenhouses, and soil conservation. Organic farming refers to crops grown with ecologically sound and sustainable methods, depending on the use of naturally occurring substances while banning or strictly limiting the use of synthetic substances such as chemicals, synthetic substances such as herbicides, pesticides, and growth hormones, and animals must be raised on 100% organic feed without the use of antibiotics. In organic farming, crops are grown without herbicides and pesticides to control weeds. GMO seeds are not used, and animals consume crops grown on the farm without being kept in small pens. It usually produces less than conventional agriculture, but reduces consumer exposure to pesticide residues and antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Foods are easier to digest, healthier, considered more natural, help people with allergies or specific dietary needs, and have more nutritional benefits. However, fossil fuels are still used to produce and ship the food, and the soil is still depleted through monoculture. Organic food can also be much more expensive and inaccessible because it is not subsidized by the government as much as other forms of agriculture. In a paper from JAMA Internal Medicine, it found that $170 billion was spent on farm subsidies from 1995 to 2010 for only 7 crops: corn, soybeans, wheat, rice, sorghum, and dairy and livestock. This partially explains why organic food products only make up about 4% of U.S. food sales, according to the USDA. Even so, if we are only able to feed a small portion of people with organic agriculture, it is still an improvement over the current ways we grow most of our food. On another note, we need to be more conscious about the resources that producing meat uses. About 1/2 of livestock is raised on pastures and rangelands, which is an alternative to CAFOs or feedlots. Free-range grazing allows animals to graze on grass their entire life cycle. Meat from free-range animals tends to be free from antibiotics and other chemicals used in feedlots. Despite this, free-range grazing requires large areas of land and can lead to overgrazing. Overusing the soil through overgrazing causes desertification, turning lush areas to deserts lacking any nutrients in the soil. While some grazing is healthy for grasslands, overgrazing occurs when too many animals graze on one area of land for too long, which damages the grasses and their roots and exceeds the carrying capacity of the rangeland area. While we should take steps to prevent overgrazing, a more sustainable way to use resources is to eat less meat. Meat production takes approximately 20 times more land to produce the same amount of calories from meat as from plants. In general, it takes much more land and water to raise animals than grow crops for consumption. For beef in particular, it takes 33 calories of grain to produce 1 calorie of beef, states ESRI.com. Less consumption of meat in our diets or development of meat substitutes could use land and energy more efficiently, reduce CO2, methane, and N2O emissions, conserve water, reduce the use of antibiotics and growth hormones, and improve topsoil conditions. Americans consume the most meat per capita in the world, and it often makes up an unreasonably large amount of our diet. Demand for meat is expected to go higher as affluence rises and more middle-income people begin consuming more meat and animal products, especially in rapidly developing countries like China. But expanding meat production could prove dangerous for animals and human health. Regarding sustainable ways to produce other foods, polyculture is a method in which more than one species is grown at the same time in a field, an imitation of the diversity of natural ecosystems. It works by planting different crops that can grow together in the same conditions as the others so that they may be planted and harvested at the same time for a bigger yield. It works by using this method because it tends to have much higher yields, while also using nutrients, space, and energy in a balanced manner. Polyculture increases self-reliance, food security, and economic growth. Although it is more labor-intensive than monoculture and requires more knowledge on crops due to the diversity being planted, it has many benefits. There is better nutrient utilization because nutrients not utilized by one crop will be beneficial to another crop in the rotation. The yield is more stable because it is not easily threatened by adverse weather conditions or environmental factors. Multiple crops can be grown on a single piece of farmland, making it much easier to manage irrigation and also lessening land and water use overall. Plants grown near each other are also more immune to pests, and growing of different crops on the same land enhances soil properties, which makes it more suitable to grow crops and prevent erosion. Growing a variety of plants on the same land also increases local biodiversity, requires less land to produce more food, and helps manage weeds due to the larger density of plants. Hydroponics is a method of growing crops without soil by using mineral nutrient solutions in a liquid. Hydroponic systems can produce a greater yield of fruits and vegetables because of the controlled environment and a much higher density of plants. This increases yield while reducing the amount of land used. They are also usually more efficient with use of other resources. According to the National Park Service, hydroponics can use up to 10% less water than traditional field irrigation. There's another form of agriculture that uses arrays of greenhouses to raise crops indoors. Water can be purified and recycled, and climate can be controlled, reducing water use and pollution. It reduces the needs for pesticides, stops topsoil erosion, and protects crops from bad weather, while allowing plants to be grown year-round. There is increased production due to the controlled climate and more efficient use of space. There is maximized profits due to plant protection from pests and diseases, and an ability to utilize resources more efficiently. This can work in conjunction with polyculture, benefiting over monoculture by lessening the need for fertilizer and water, because root systems at different depths in the soil capture nutrients and moisture better. Examples of soil conservation methods are no-till agriculture and crop rotation. Tilling farmland disrupts soil and lowers its ability to hold water. No-till farming allows the remainder of the last crop to decompose, giving nutrients and energy back to the soil because it is left alone and not tilled. Monoculture, consisting of planting the same crop in a field year after year, depletes the soil of essential nutrients. Rotating crops by planting something different every few years decreases the likelihood of the field to be affected by disease because the pathogens and weeds that cause them don't build up. Although various agriculture methods have disadvantages, we need to make use of other options besides traditional large-scale industrial monoculture if we are to protect our planet and human health. I encourage you to do your own research about agriculture in the United States, but more simply, I hope you are more conscious about the food you consume. And individuals are often unable to make real change in these systems, but we can educate ourselves and make informed decisions about food. Going vegan or only consuming all organic foods is expensive and often unrealistic. However, even taking small steps can have positive impacts. I encourage you to substitute some of the meat you consume or buy organically when you can, wash your foods from pesticides, limit processed food production, or eat locally when possible. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Ava, for that talk on food sustainability. Maybe now we'll be able to enjoy food without the guilt of not being environmentally conscious. To wrap up this afternoon, I would like to extend a round of thanks and gratitude to several parties. First, we'd like to thank all of you who showed up today for coming to this event and sincerely hope that you enjoyed your time. We'd also like to thank our sponsors for making this event possible in the first place, all the administrators and teachers who really made this event happen, and a big, big thank you and congratulations to all of our speakers today. Woo! for their wonderful speeches and courage to stand up here and speak. Once again, thank you all for coming, and we hope you all had a great time. Have a good afternoon.